Boom. What's going on, everybody? You already know Brian's about to drop some knowledge on us. Oh, man, I try to stay out of this for so long. When it comes to certain FGC discourse topics, I really have to control myself because I actually hate getting involved in Twitter discourse. As much as it might seem like I love it because I get sucked into it so often, I hate it. And I think that's the Twitter disease. It's such a good format for sharing really dumbed down surface level opinions, and for just absolutely being the worst example of yourself. Like, it's just great for broadcasting the worst of yourself to the world, and it also invites lots of people to respond with the worst version of themselves. And so then everyone gets defensive and projects that perceived attack with their defense mechanisms back out into the world on Twitter, and then all communication breaks down. And that's how we end up where we are. I want to reserve Twitter for just being me sharing things that I like and that are positive as much as possible. So everyone's been talking about first to two versus first to three, and I mean, it all kind of started just because I think people were showing off some combo conversions in Street Fighter 6, saying, "Wow, look how much damage this all is! Look at all the things you could do." There was just a few examples of tweets that went out of people basically just showing off these things and be like, "Wow, in Street Fighter 6, you could potentially die really quick. Maybe we should have first to three." And it's pretty cyclical. This happens at the release of every fighting game. The players start speculating on if it's worth it to go to first to three rather than first to two, because we've had first to two until winners finals, losers finals, grand finals as the standard in the FGC for like 2+ decades at this point. That's always assumed to be the default competitive format. And so of course people poke and prod at that, say, "Hey, is it time to change? Is it time to change?" Here, I think I have found the example. One of the examples of the tweets stirring the pot here. Flawless Deku showing off around here Street Fighter 6. I like this combo. That combo's sick. Oh. I had audio off that whole time. 14 seconds, fire emoji. Should 3 out of 5 be the standard? Question mark, eye emoji. Hashtag Street Fighter 6 demo. Hashtag Street Fighter 6 Luke. Kind of stirring the pot, purposely trying to engage in some engagement tactics here. And I think it worked. I think the engagement tactics work, and then a few other players are chiming in. I think Big Bird chimed in as well with how brutal the game could be. And I honestly think mechanically, I kind of get it. Street Fighter 6 offers a unique system with the drive systems because you have the drive meter up front. So this is the first Street Fighter game where you have the meter to engage in super strong offensive tactics up front at the very beginning of the round without having to build resources and without having to worry about carrying it over between rounds because it's just there. Sure, Alpha 3 did it too. Sure. I guess I'm referring to, listen, when I say the first, I'm referring to CPT era and beyond, right? You got to understand my frame of reference here. It's always competitive CPT, developer investing funds into the community and beyond, before Capcom investment and after Capcom investment. That's what I'm referring to. All right. So, and the modern Street Fighters with Capcom money backing it, you got offense out of the gate. People are like, "Oh, whoa, this is so offensive. Maybe we should get first to three, please." And this happens every fighting game, man. And it's pretty ugly because the moment people start suggesting that, like I said, I think it's the format of Twitter. You see so many responses that come out, which, the players are generally, I would say, treading lightly, where they say if schedules permits, if time permits, it might be nice if we do first to three. I think generally I see qualifications in these requests to consider changing the format, but then I see like way too much personally, which is where like it makes me irate, is the response from people who are on the organizational side and from those who are much more sympathetic to those TOs and organizers is shut the fuck up, right? And that drives me nuts. Not that I even think that first to three is feasible or should be a thing, but there's that response is shut the fuck up, and then there's the other response, which is first to two versus first to three is the exact same thing. Nothing matters. So I feel like I want to talk about first to two versus first to three personally, as if we're trying to judge a metric for trying to more accurately determine who the better player is and trying to reduce volatility in results. I feel like it's insane to argue that first to two is the same thing as first to three. It's definitely not the same thing, and I don't know, I see that argument a lot, which part, that's where I think the point is missed when people try to argue like, oh, we shouldn't bother doing first to three because first to two is the same thing as first to three. That is the wrong argument to make entirely, in my opinion. Entirely. In fact, I have, anecdotal evidence is not good, but I literally have, it's funny that this happens now. I have 2 examples. I entered 2 tournaments last week, and I have 2 examples to show you this. So last week I played in Full Bar Fridays, and I went up against Giyu in this, I think this was losers final. So, and if you look at Giyu, our set history here from FG combo, this doesn't include everything, but this says from these sets I'm 75% win rate, and I think it might be higher, including a few other events that are not listed here. But in this losers final set, I was down 0-2 in this set, and then I won 3 straight. If that was a first to 2 set, I would have lost and I would have gotten 3rd place. Instead, I was able to move on and secure 2nd place. I ended up resetting the bracket but losing to Pokey in grand final, so I got 2nd. But the difference between the first to 2 and first to 3 changed my placement and secured me like $100 more in terms of prize revenue and personal pride, because I care about placing 2nd rather than 3rd. So I think one thing that gets lost is like the variance plays out more over time, and we value placings beyond first. I think that's one concept that I think it's really lost when people discuss this stuff, is as a community, we really value placements beyond just first. There's this sort of sentiment underneath all of this that if you're not first, you're last, which I think is absolutely incorrect. If that was the case, we would have 0 prize money for the other placings. If that was the case, we wouldn't care about like streaming every single top 8 set. We wouldn't be proud of our top 8 results. Why would we have a medal ceremony for top 8? Or I guess top 6 now. Hey, the Hotto. Top 6, I suppose. We wouldn't have these medal ceremonies, right? We wouldn't talk about, making the top 8. We value placements beyond just first. And I think there's so much competition in the world of fighting games these days. It's insane to think that, it's all, if you're not first, you're last. That is absolutely not true, right? So I cared that I got 2nd instead of 3rd, even though I didn't get 1st. And then the same week, I was down 0-2 in the set, and then I won 3 straight to win the set against Giyu. The same week, I played in Casa, and I went up against Shine in winners finals, and Shine is my tournament demon. Besides, like, Idom, I guess. Idom, Punk, and Shine are like the 3 people who've cooked me the most in tournaments. Look at this. 21% to 79%. Not a good record. I haven't had a winning set over him since like 2021. It's been rough. Last week, I was up 2-1 against Shine, and then he won 2 straight to win the set. So I have an example of both being impacted. I won a set from being down 0-2 because of first to 3, and I lost a set while being up 2-1 because of first to 3 in the same week. So that's anecdotal evidence. It's not, great evidence, but I think people were suggesting that these numbers have been crunched before, and I wish someone can dig that up. Apparently, Ultra David or someone else in the community compiled some stats from major CPT events over the years and looked at like how many times after a person got 2 games did the person behind in the set score win the set, and apparently that ended up being something around 10%. And a lot of people were saying that that's not a big deal, and I think that's insane to me personally. As a competitor, 10% variance in results from first to 2 to first to 3 is a massive change, because that boils into not just that set, that cascades into every set that follows. That changes the entire course of history. But to me, 13 to 17%, if those are the numbers, that's fucking massive as a competitor. If it was 0.05%, I would go, okay, that's a statistically insignificant result to variance that we can't account for, and we don't need to care about that. But as a competitor, as someone who is competing and vying for higher placements for both monetary and esteem and accolades and clout because those things translate into opportunities and growth. I care about that, right? I care about that. So maybe spectators don't, maybe TOs don't, which is 100% fair. Not everyone needs to care about that, but I care about that. Let's see, we got the receipts already. I have 597 CPT top 8 matches in the database this year. The 2x win rate is 0.868 as of Sunday. So if you're up 2x, I guess what he's saying is if you're at 2-1 or 2-0, you win 87% of the time. So 13% of the time you lose. That to me is a huge amount of variance. So I think the argument that when people try to use the argument that first to 2 versus first to 3 doesn't matter in terms of like figuring out who the better player is, because once again, a whole asterisk or whole frame of reference we need to understand is that being the better player is a highly nebulous concept. It doesn't mean anything really. It's a subjective definition. What we do is we create competitive formats, and then we determine a winner. And from those objective results, from those competitive formats, we extrapolate with our own beliefs and our own value systems and our own statistics. We try to extrapolate who the better player is in our head, right? The objectivity is this person won in this format on this day, right? That's objective. Who is better or not is something that we have to figure out through our heads. And that's why we can have debates like this. That's why people debate about who's the GOAT of every sport forever. There's no one way to define that for any medium, right? The more data you can collect and the better formats become and the more developed they become, we get better and better at seeking the truth, right? Like the act of determining who is better at something is like, it's like an exercise in seeking truth. It's philosophical. It really is. Like, how do you figure out who is better? So you got to remember that being better is it's subjective, right? We all have to agree about that. Okay. That's something that we have to agree about for the conversation to even proceed. we have to agree, right? So it depends on what you value. Variance in results will normalize over time. That is a fact. Just like flipping a coin, the odds are 50%. You can flip a coin 1,000 times and heads will come up, 90% of the time. But over infinity, it'll approach 50-50, right? I think with two players over time, you will see the results normalize to a degree. So the point is, how far along do we want to go? At what point is there a value cutoff versus the return, right? Because the point of a tournament is not to determine who's the best player. The point of a tournament is to declare a winner, entertain the community, get people connected, put on a valuable production for the viewers at home. There's a lot of things that a tournament is for, but to determine the best player, that's not the job of a tournament. That's why players will argue, I value the competitive stability the most because I want to, be rewarded for my skill and reduce the amount of variance in results. I think it's very clear to me that the longer you go in a set, the more the results normalize. If you have a clear end goal in mind, if there's a clear end goal in mind in a set, not just people randomly playing and not giving a fuck. If it's a first to whatever, if you increase the set length where it doesn't start stressing too much of your physical endurance, you'll have more consistent results and less upsets. Obviously, competitive players want that because they don't want to fly out across the planet to potentially just go, and lose to someone, their number one seed, and then they lose right away or lose in pools, and then they waste that entire time investment and monetary investment, and then that player who upsets them goes on to lose immediately after, right? So they want to avoid that as much as possible. So do audiences love upsets? Yes, we do. I am of the argument that I don't think that's true. And hear me out before you start typing away. Hear me out. We have seeding for a reason, right? We have seeding in open bracket tournaments because we want to have rising action. We want to ensure that as a tournament is coming to a conclusion, we want there to be a clear rise in tension as the two most powerful players face off towards the end of a bracket. That is what guarantees the most dramatic and entertaining product, right? What you really want is to be entertained. If you have one upset and it's your favorite local players, your homie upsetting a top player, that is great for that moment. However, if they upset a top level player who is projected to go very far in the bracket, and then they immediately lose right after, then instead of the top player making it to grand finals winner side, potentially you have, seed number 13, 15, whatever, 20 going to grand finals. And then that other top player, there's another upset that happens where top player number 2 loses, and then they have to face each other and for 9th, only one of them gets into top 8. That defeats some of the tension. Now, there could still be a big dramatic storyline that comes out of that naturally through some other circumstances. But for example, CPT NA, the number 2, had Idom and Punk play for 9th place, right? You wanted to see those two in grand finals. Now, they got to play and it was dramatic. And I still think there was a great storyline. There was still a very, very entertaining tournament. But I still think that's not as dramatic as both of them facing off in grand finals for the final CPT spot. Like, you can potentially, the more upsets you have, the less guarantee there is for a good storyline, because most upsets end up with the person who causes the upset losing right after. So I think as a viewer, you actually prefer favorites to go to a certain degree because I think it builds storylines. Now, some upsets are great. Like if someone causes an upset and blows through the tournament and they're a surprise win, like that's obviously a great storyline. But drama has to have this rising action and tension. So Zen coming out of nowhere and then beating everybody's ass and getting the job done, that's a great upset because he kept his promise. He caused the upset and kept it going. Zen wasn't an upset, he got to grand finals. What? The unseeded motherfucker who won the LCQ that made it to grand finals wasn't an upset? He upset everybody for the whole weekend over and over and over. That's the greatest series of upsets in Street Fighter history. It's not an upset when he proves he's that level. That's not how that works. That's not how that works. Okay, let me give you a hypothetical. You have a pool with Daigo, Valoran, and Venao. All those people were getting top 8 at CPT events. Daigo and Valoran were winning them, going far in Capcom Cup. Who gets out in winners? Trick question. It was Brian F. That's the only example I can think of because it was fucking me. I beat Daigo off stream and nobody fucking knows. Is that good for the community? Yeah, you would say this is a bad drama. So what I'm getting at, basically, this is going on a long tangent. We don't always want upsets. Yeah, if we always wanted upsets, we would do first to one. We would do one round first to one. Like if we really didn't care about variance, we would reduce the number of games. So we care about variance. I think that's a clear thing we can establish. Both players and spectators, to a degree, care about maintaining a low level of variance to a degree. It's just we're debating the extent of that and the practicality of taking action to account for that. I think you're convincing me, Brian, but what about the time this would take? I feel TOs need to worry about that. I'm not even arguing for first to 3. At no point have I stated a position. What I am of the position of is I hate bad arguments. I play on this thing because you guys have shitty arguments. Do you see what a bad argument does to a motherfucker? I switched to this thing because you stick players have terrible logic. Your arguments are so bad and so just based on, prejudice and traditionalism and not wanting to get with the times that I switched to hitbox. So I didn't say we should switch everything to first to 3. I did not say that at all. What I did say is I don't like how the community reacts when we talk about first to 3 versus first to 2. So the argument I was saying is first to 2 versus first to 3 is the same. It is not. It is absolutely not the same. And I think we all actually don't want high variance in our results. And then it becomes a question of what format is best to manage variance, to get 400 people into a ballroom for a weekend and then have them all play their matches and get it done, have an entertaining spectacle for the viewers, and make TOs not hate their life, right? Like we're trying to balance all those things. That's not easy to do, especially when people start slinging mud at each other real quick. But yeah, I think we have to figure out how to not talk shit about each other so much. And the other thing is, I think what I usually see is it's a lot of like local TOs who get super frustrated and start blowing up on Twitter. And I get it. That's why I made this tweet. I just really hate the super angry, dismissive attitude people take when players advocate for change. There needs to be pushback to change. There needs to be pushback to change. A lot of organizers sound like they hate the community they are a part of, and it's ugly. Lots of frustration bubbling up. You often see people just say, don't talk, press buttons and shut up, which is very frustrating to see. And I can tell that a lot of TOs feel very jaded, and it bubbles up a lot of ugly frustrations. But I think one thing that gets missed is that when players are spitballing here about what formats they want to see, they're trying to talk to Capcom. John Capcom is their target recipient of their message, right? They're not talking to local TOs. And I saw a lot of other people saying that, what the CPT format is set to influences the expectations for local TOs, which I sort of agree. It definitely impacts it. Just like, I was just thinking that Texas Showdown being first to 2 was disappointing for top 8, and that was from CPT expectations, right? But I also don't really agree that that's necessarily the case, that they have to follow through with that. A lot of online tournaments, a lot of online locals do first to 2 for top 8 and have done that for the entirety of Street Fighter V, even though all of Street Fighter V CPT top 8s have been first to 3. NLBC Online has done first to 2 top 8 its entire life, right? I just played in a first to 2 online tournament. So I don't know. I often see a lot of the loud voices in these conversations are people who are running small events for the local scene. And it's unfair to place those expectations on them. But I think that, I think there needs to be this understanding that that's not where the expectations are being placed from these people having these comments. I think high level players kind of theorize about their dream formats, and then they hope that some kind of inroads can be met to make small steps towards that dream format. Some concessions could be made. And what they expect is for those to take place at premieres, not at every single local throughout the country and world, right? Generally, you have to understand that if a pro that has been in Capcom Cup every single year, Evo Grand Finals, and is a contender to go to Capcom Cup again, if they're talking about formats for tournaments, they're really not talking about your local. They are not. That is the least of their concerns. It's just the format of Twitter that makes it seem like all the voices are directly talking to you. Every tweet is talking at you, and so it gets people on the defensive. It's the fault is with Twitter. It's the format. It's the way we communicate. It's not good. It's unhealthy. But yeah, I wish more organizers understood that they're not personally coming up to you to say, hey buddy, nice job carrying this local community on your back. Now do first to 3 and stay here till 3 a.m. every single night for no pay and paying out of pocket to support your community, right? Like, that's not what they're trying to say. I think that needs to be understood a little bit better. Here's my real position. Please don't take this out of context. Every time I talk about this, I've talked about this multiple times. Please don't take any of this out of context. The issue with this is the stakes of our competition and the scales of competitive play have grown far beyond our current competitive infrastructure. We have 1 million on the line for Capcom Cup with over $1 million plus in prizing for whatever format they're going to cook up, because for some reason we still don't have the details for the CPT for this year, which is ridiculous. I can't believe we don't know about the format yet. Having the open bracket format, the open bracket double elimination format as the sole means for qualifying for the Capcom Cup is a problem. And that is the source of these frustrations. That is the source of diverging expectations between the average player, which is 99.99% of the community. 99.999% of the community are people who are in the organizational side, are casual competitive players, people just having fun, and then 0.00001% of the people are people who are legitimately vying and have an actual legitimate shot at qualifying for Capcom Cup and earning the millions in prize pools, right? There is diverging expectations between them. And the problem is when you have an open bracket format and that's the only format you have, you by necessity are aiming to satisfy the needs of the many over the needs of the few, which is fine for that format. That's just how it is, right? You just have 400 people in a room. It's not scalable. You can't keep increasing things to make things more competitively stable and less volatile because it doesn't scale that way. The format just doesn't lend itself to that, right? There's a reason why we don't do round robin everything. 400 people, everybody play each other round robin. How many is that? Is that 400 factorial? Let's run all 40,000 games and then see who has the best record and they're the number one player for the weekend. We can't do that. So the problem is, even though we keep growing in prize pools, all we're doing is open bracket tournaments where we're sending Daigo across the world for him to go into pools with other world-class players to potentially lose off-stream. The format doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense from an economics perspective. It's too risky to be a player at that level. It's too risky to sponsor a player at that level because there's no guaranteed screen time. And you can't do anything about it because you have to manage the logistics of keeping the actual tournament running on time, right? Like it's too difficult to juggle. We need more ways to funnel up players through open bracket qualifiers so that players can earn spots to more consistent leagues where they can have less volatility, can play longer sets in a non-open format because they qualified through it through open means. Like there needs to be a way to funnel players up through a tier system. Something needs to grow. Having solely open bracket, this will always be a debate. This will always be an issue. And I think that's the problem, is that the format fundamentally has not changed in 20 plus years. And then we keep adding more money to it to increase the spectacle, but we're not thinking of a way to make this feasible and scalable for players. PGA format. Yeah, PGA format's the closest format I'm thinking of. Just do invitationals. I don't want invitationals because I want people to earn their spots. Obviously, I'm spitballing here. Don't take what I'm saying as law. I'm not an event organizer, so obviously my perspective is skewed. I'm just speaking theoretically. I'm just speaking from a high level of issues I see. So please go easy on me with your criticism. I'm not coming to you as an expert. I'm coming to you as a fellow layman with an idea. Okay? Okay, we're all on the same page here. All right. Okay. So I have a theory that open bracket tournaments do not offer as much value for high-level players or low-level players as people think. In an open bracket tournament, 25% of the entire tournament mathematically must go 0-2, and that impacts obviously the lower-level players. But also for the high-level players, right? For the people who want to go far, there's so much competition that, and because we play such short set formats, you can have people like Daigo and Valoran in the same pool before they even get to top 96. And then both those people had just won CPT events. I beat Daigo and Valoran in that final round pool. The next weekend, Daigo and Valoran were in a CPT Premier top 8 fighting each other. The next weekend. They went to, what was it, NCR? They were in pools together. We're suddenly in winner's side top 8 together. Do you see how ridiculous that variance is? Just because of the way the seeding and the number of players and the brackets lined up? But because we had to facilitate playing so many matches, even though the vast majority of the players are people who are going to go 0-2 just by the math of the bracket, and the vast majority of the players entering the tournament are there to have fun, which is 100% what it should be. People should be entering to have fun. It sacrifices the potential success, or the stability rather, for someone who's trying to become a professional player, right? And I would argue that that's fine because, you know, it's the will of the majority, which is fine. But I think if you want to facilitate value for both, I think it's better to kind of have ways to separate skill levels. If you're also consistently traveling to tournaments and you're not at an elite level, you're going to be unseeded and you're going to play against really high level opponents early on because you're going to be unseeded, right? So you go to your first tournament and you got to play Daigo round 1 and winners, and then in losers, you got to play some ultimate grandmaster guy or some grandmaster player who went to losers because he fought Nemo first round, right? And then you go 0-2. That's cool because you had the novelty of maybe meeting your heroes and playing them round 1. I think that's something that people really like, is the ability to play other known players in bracket. Like that intermingling is a very valuable and cool thing, and you know, it feels very egalitarian, I suppose, and equal, and everyone's in the same footing. So that's cool, right? That's cool. Now you go to another premiere, and then you got to play Punk round 1, and then in losers, you got to play Space Boy, and you go 0-2 again. And then you go to another tournament, you know, you got to play Nemo round 1, and then you play some other Grandmaster player round 2 in losers, and you go 0-2 again. What I'm getting at is you actually get very little value out of being a lower level player in tournament because they purposely seed you to get bodied by higher level players. Meanwhile, the room is filled with people who are closer to your skill level, but you guys don't play each other. 95% of the people in that room would have a great match with you because they are equal or close to you in skill level, and you would have a very competitive match. But you don't play each other because the purpose of the tournament is to match the strong player with the weaker player so that the strong players funnel up towards the top and play each other at the end. My point is, I think the open bracket tournament is not always the best value for lower level players. In fact, something that I've had the most fun with in terms of being just a casual player was for TNS. They do an 0-2 bracket for their Marvel tournaments. I played Marvel 3 casually. I suck ass at the game, but because I went 0-2 in the TNS bracket, I got to play in the 0-2 bracket, and I got to win a couple matches, have really close sets. I had really fun competitive matches with other really bad Marvel players because they took the 25% of the bracket that got eliminated right away because we're all bad, and they let us play each other. And I had way more fun in the 0-2 bracket than in the main tournament. So what I'm getting at is a straightforward open bracket tournament increases volatility for top level players. It's very risky for people to sponsor players because there's a high chance that they might be upset off stream. They might not get any guaranteed screen time. In fact, you might have to get all the way to top 8 through losers, and even then you might only get one match guaranteed screen time. And then even for lower level players, you don't get much play time. You, by definition, how many people have to go 0-2, 25%? You have to not play. So I think it's worth considering that doing only double elimination open bracket is not necessarily the only way to do it. It's not necessarily the best way to provide value to the majority of the community, which is the competitive casual player, and then also the top level players who are trying to find more consistency to be able to produce great content and great drama for the spectators at home, because we want the good players to be good and we want them to go the distance because we want to see the epic battles. We want to watch the good players battle. We want that. The people at home want to see that, and the people at the venue want to have fun competitive games. So what I'm saying is, all we do is open bracket. Now, when we have Evo to me is perfect as it is. Having Evo be the giant open bracket summit where it's thousands of people, just bodies after bodies, people just falling left and right, and people just trying to climb the mountain, corpses falling off left and right. It's a fucking bloodbath. It's crazy. It's who's going to meet at the summit. Evo is great as it is, open bracket. But do we need every tournament to be that way? Do we need a whole season to be that way? Do we not want also other formats where potentially we have people who are in open bracket qualifiers, and then maybe the top 3 players who get to the top 3 position from a big open bracket event, they qualify to the C League. And then the C League, you have 10 or so players who play sets every other week in a longer format, maybe a 1st to 7 format. And then they do this round robin sort of format, and then the top records, the top 2 can to move on to the B League, and then maybe the bottom 2 have to drop out and go back to the open bracket qualifiers. And then that way the people who keep climbing the ladder have more consistent results and more consistent screen time. But also, because you still have open bracket tournaments, anyone is open to climb this ladder, but you also remove the top level players from having to stomp on Johnny Donuts, and Johnny Donuts can play Timmy 2 sweeps, and they can fight each other and have more competitive matches, and they can have stepping stones to grow. I want to make it to the C League. I want to make it to the B League. Like, there's no stepping stones for people because it's either your first or your last, which is fucking crazy. And when you have this separation of some kind of format, you can afford to offer longer format sets because you have less players to cater to. So what I'm getting at is, I don't think 1st to 2 versus 1st to 3 is a discussion we have. Obviously, 1st to 3 has real constraints because we have huge open bracket events. We are crowded with the number of great games. Tournaments are not just for Street Fighter. I mean, which is another whole discussion, right? What other esport has so many games under one roof, right? Which is another beauty of the FGC, but it's also a difficult thing to manage because we have tons of games to cater to, right? So it's not scalable. It's like saying we should raise the tournament fee to get more prize funding, right? It's not scalable. You can't keep taxing the casual competitive person, the 95% of the player pool. You can't keep increasing the set length because there's too many players, right? It doesn't make sense to increase the runtime so much just to get slightly more consistent results and reduce volatility for a small percentage of the player pool, right? But you can do those things if you provide a way to separate those players from the rest of the play pool. So I think the conversation is just framed wrong to begin with. We have to have a bigger conversation. 1st to 3 versus 1st to 2 versus 1st to 5. None of that scales with our current infrastructure. The problem is we've been doing the same fucking thing for 20 years. That's my stance. I think there could potentially be better ways to do things for everybody. So I didn't know a way to put that into a tweet, which wouldn't make me rip my own hair out. So